from Crystal Lake, which means that if you see a man in a hockey mask behind me, I should really duck. This is Kurt Berglund with another Pine Tar Baseball Great Teams briefing. Today, the 1984 Chicago Cubs, winners of 96 ball games and the National League Eastern Division in 1984. Losers of the National League Championship Series to a very, I think everybody agrees, mediocre 1984 San Diego Padre team. So today we're going to look at the 84 Cubs and try and understand what's going on there and give you some ideas for things you might think about with the great team set when the Cubs come to town against whoever it is that you're using. First, the lineups. Now, one of the things that's important to remember about the 84 Cubs is that their roster changed a great deal over the course of the season. Dick Ruthven was their starting pitcher on opening day. Mel Hall, Bill Buckner were considered key players of the team. They were both gone shortly after that. Dallas Green made a huge trade for Rick Sutcliffe mid-season. Sutcliffe went out of his mind for the rest of the year and became the best pitcher in baseball for a while, and the ace of the Cubs staff. So, the lineups that we see, these are the platoon lineups against each kind of pitching that were used by manager, and I use that term in its loosest possible sense, Jim Fry, who never saw a game he couldn't undermanage. Here were the platoon lineups for the Cubs in the 1984 National League Championship Series. Versus left-handed pitching, Bobby Dernier in center, Ryan Sandberg at second, Gary Matthews in left, Keith Moreland in right, Keith Moreland in right, Ron Cey at third, Jody Davis the catcher, Leon Durham at first, Larry Boa the shortstop, and then the pitcher. Versus right-handed pitching in the playoffs, Fry used Dernier in center, Sandberg at second, Matthews in left, Durham at first, Moreland in right, Cey at third, Davis the catcher, and Boa at short. Those were your lineups at the end of the year. Dallas Green talked about the trades that he made. Basically, what there was of a Cub farm system he emptied during the course of the year. And if you look at this cast of characters in 1984, lovable players for sure, but this is not a team that was built for the long haul. These were veteran players making one last run, or in the case of Dallas Green, one first run for this franchise. At the season's end, at the end of the season, the pitching rotation was Sutcliffe, Steve Trout, who got the start in Game 2 of the playoffs and won it, Scott Sanderson, who got the start in Game 3 of the playoffs, even though Dennis Eckersley got the start in Game 4. That's one piece of Jim Fry's strategy that I think I would have quarreled with at the time. Well, I did quarrel with at the time, and yeah, that didn't get me anywhere. And Dick Ruthven, opening day starter for the 1984 Cubs, was the number 5 man in the rotation at the end of the season. You will notice when you get your Pine Tar 1984 Cubs that all of your bullpen options are right-handed. Fry did not have a left-handed option in the bullpen for the vast majority of the year. And he did not in the playoffs, except for bringing Trout back, who was warming up in Game 5 when everything broke loose under Leon Durham's glove. And that brown substance running down his pants. You'll notice when you get the 1984 Cubs that corner defense is an issue. Matthews had no range, and when he did, a flying ball was in serious danger of maiming him. Now, this is a guy with major offensive value, but couldn't catch a ball to save his life by 1984, which is weird because he was pretty decent in the 70s. So I don't know what happened there. Keith Moreland, slow. I think he'd beat Ron Kittle in a foot race, but it would be really close. Moreland, very versatile, didn't hit right-handers especially well. Did have the right field job after they traded Hall as part of the Sutcliffe trade. So Bobby Dernier, who was great in center field, offensively and defensively, had to run sprints every game between Matthews' lack of range and death to flying things, and Keith Moreland, who was busy preparing for his sprint against Ron Kittle. That's a lot of room to cover, especially if you're not at Wrigley Field. Ron Say, third baseman, step and a dive on a good day was the range. The Cubs grew their infield grass really tall to try and slow down the ground balls. Didn't make much difference. And then we have the topic of shortstop. Larry Boa, who also was not exactly fleet of foot in 1984. The Cubs had a pretty decent shortstop controversy going by August. Even though they were fighting for first place, there was serious discussion in the Tribune, Chicago Tribune, about who exactly should be the shortstop for the Cubs down the stretch. Boa or Tom Verizor, who I think of as Larry Boa but without the talent, or a youngster named Dave Owen, whose baseball claim to fame was winning the Sandberg game with a pinch hit in extra innings to drive home the winning run. Eventually, Fry did make a decision and went with Boa down the stretch, but that meant that they were really playing with 7 offensive players, and that's calling Keith Moreland offensive. And all right, couple last things. One is that the Cubs lineup was discussed for the World Series. And the Cub outfield defense was considered so bad that even though the Cubs had some bats on the bench, people like Richie Hebner, Jay Johnstone, Dave Lopes, they decided that what they were going to do is get a glove in left field so that Gary Matthews would not be in danger of giving himself a concussion by trying to catch a fly ball, by putting Henry Cotto in left field against the Tigers. Everybody knew it was going to be the Tigers. All the Tigers had to do was to finish the job against the Royals and wait for the Cubs to get there. Well, of course, we know the Cubs never, in fact, got there. Henry Cotto was their 4th outfielder. And what they were going to do was to put him in left field and have Matthews be the DH. Now, if you use the great team set and the Cubs go to an American League park and you want them to use the DH, just know that that would have been Fry's answer. That Fry's answer for the World Series would have been to make Matthews the DH and put Cotto somewhere down here in the American League Park. Well, actually, because back then, in even years, and 1984 was an even year, the DH was used in the World Series that year for all 7 games. So even games that would have been in Wrigley Field would have been using the DH, and Cotto would have been the man in left field. I think that speaks volumes about what Fry thought about the outfield defense, which is an interesting thing for you to think about as you use the set. This is a team with serious holes on defense. They won 96 games. They scored an awful lot of runs, and I'll tell you what they did have is 3 folks at the top of the lineup that got on base a lot. Bob Dernier, Ryan Sandberg, the MVP of the league, You're going to love his card. And Gary Matthews, who, while yes, those fly balls were a danger to him, he got on base at a ridiculous clip and drove in runs, drew an obscene number of walks, and so there were plenty of people on base for Durham, Moreland, Say, and Davis to drive in during the course of a ball game. Not only that, but once they got their starting rotation figured out, the Cubs could pitch too. And they had a Hall of Famer, Lee Smith, as their closer. So there's a lot going for this team. You're going to find them a tough customer as they go against the other teams in the great team set. But like every great team that we've seen so far, they have a weakness. There is kryptonite. And so it'll be fun to see if you can overcome that as you use these great teams in the Pine Tar Baseball Great Team set. We're halfway home with Great Team Set production, and stay tuned for more updates. I'll be doing more team briefings in the days to come. If you're interested in Pine Tar Baseball but don't know a lot about it, ttlbaseballgame.com, ttlbaseballgame.com. And finally, of course, please click like and subscribe to my channel. My name is Kurt Berglund. I hope you have a great day. So long, everybody.